When two awakened souls meet, something shifts in the unseen architecture of existence. It is as if two inner worlds long hidden beneath layers of masks, shadows, and forgotten memories suddenly recognize one another, not by the logic of the mind, but by the ancient intelligence of the psyche. This meeting is not merely an encounter between two individuals, it is an encounter between two forces of nature, each carrying the weight of their transformations, their battles, their descents into darkness, and their ascents into light. An awakened soul is not one who has avoided suffering, but one who has walked through it with eyes open. Such a being has confronted the landscapes of their own unconscious, touched the wound that once terrified them, and learned to reshape them into sources of insight. When two souls of this nature stand before each other, there is an immediate dissolution of pretenses. Masks fall away not by effort, but because they cannot exist where truth is present. Their connection is not built on attraction, desire, or need, it is built on recognition. A recognition as old as the first spark of awareness within humanity itself. In such a meeting, the air becomes charged with a strange familiarity. They sense, without words, that they are standing before someone who sees beyond surfaces. Their presence becomes a mirror, not one that flatters, but one that reveals. Each soul reflects back to the other both the radiance of their growth and the remnants of their still unexplored shadows. This is why such encounters can be both comforting and unsettling. Awakening does not erase the shadow, it simply teaches one how to walk with it. And in the gaze of an awakened other, every hidden fragment becomes illuminated. There is no need to speak outwardly of the journeys that shaped them. Their inner landscape speaks silently to one another. One soul can sense the storms the other has survived, the nights spent wrestling with inner chaos, the rebirths that happen in solitude. And yet, despite that solitude, in this moment there is a sense of togetherness, of finally encountering someone who understands the symbolic language of the soul. Awakened souls communicate in a different way. Much is conveyed through silence, through pauses, through the energetic field that forms between them. Their dialogue is not merely intellectual, it is archetypal. They exchange symbols rather than sentences, meanings rather than explanation. What one expresses, the other receives not only with the mind, but with the depth of their entire being. Each word becomes a seed capable of awakening something dormant. What happens when these two souls meet is not simply connection, it is amplification. Their presence magnifies each other's strengths and exposes each other's blind spots, not to harm, but to reveal what still longs to be integrated. In this way, each becomes a catalyst for the other's continued evolution. Their meeting becomes alchemical, a merging of two inner fires that does not extinguish either flame, but causes both to burn more clearly. There is a sense of destiny woven into such an encounter, not destiny in the romantic sense of fate, bringing two lovers together, but destiny as the psyche's deep intelligence, guiding two evolving beings toward each other at the exact moment they are prepared to understand the encounter. Nothing is accidental when both are awake. They recognize that life has orchestrated this meeting not for comfort, but for growth, for expansion, for deeper realization. Such meetings do not demand permanence. Some awakened souls walk together for years, others only meet for a single moment that changes the direction of their inner journey. The significance of the encounter is not measured by time, but by impact. Even a brief meeting can echo across a lifetime, because the soul does not measure experience chronologically, it measures experience by transformation. When two awakened souls meet, they do not complete. They awaken each other further. They do not cling, but they resonate. They do not possess, but they understand. They do not fear the truth within one another because they have already learned to face it within themselves. And in that shared courage, a field of possibility opens. A field where both can evolve without pretending, without shrinking, without betraying their own inner nature. In the presence of another awakened soul, one feels seen not in the shallow sense of recognition, but in the profound sense of being understood at the core, where language fails and only essence remains. It is in this sacred recognition that a rare and powerful phenomenon unfolds. Two consciousnesses expanding not in isolation, but in response to one another, like two stars whose gravitational fields intersect and reshape the space around them. What happens when two awakened souls meet is not magic, it is the natural consequence of inner work. It is the moment when two individuals, having ventured through their own depths, become capable of meeting another not from their wounds, but from their wholeness. Such a meeting becomes a reminder that the journey toward awakening is not only personal, it is also relational. For in the eyes of another who has awakened, we see reflected the possibility of what we are still becoming. When two awakened souls recognize each other, the experience unfolds in a way that bypasses ordinary perception and language, as if an ancient memory stirs within both of them, prompting a familiarity that cannot be traced to any physical encounter or shared history. It is a recognition that emerges from a deeper layer of consciousness, where the psyche holds all symbolic impressions gathered across years of inner work, silent struggles, and transformative experiences. In the presence of another who has walked a similar inward path, something in the depths responds, almost like a tuning fork vibrating in resonance with a matching frequency. This recognition is not based on the superficial markers by which people typically evaluate one another. It does not depend on physical appearance, social identity, achievements, or personal story. Instead, it arises from the energetic signature carried silently within each awakened soul, a signature shaped by the nights spent confronting fear, by the moments of clarity that emerged after painful self-revelation, and by the courage it took to descend into the unconscious and witness the truth beneath the ego's illusion. The initial moment of recognition often feels like stepping into a field where familiar patterns dissolve. Both souls sense that the other is not approaching from a place of pretense or ego performance. There is no need to impress, no need to hide, no need to negotiate emotional safety through masks or defensive strategies. The psyche instinctively knows that the other has cultivated the capacity to see with depth, to listen beyond words, to sense what lies beneath the surface. Because of this, the interaction begins on a foundation of authenticity, unfiltered and unforced. Even silence feels full, as though the quiet between them carries meaning shaped by the unconscious rather than by words. This kind of recognition manifests not merely as emotional warmth, but as a psychological unveiling. Each soul perceives the other through a symbolic lens, intuitively grasping the archetypal patterns the other embodies. They might sense the strength forged from past wounds, the resilience developed in isolation, the wisdom earned through facing inner fragmentation. They also sense the vulnerabilities, the traces of old fears, the subtle remnants of unresolved stories. But instead of judging or recoiling, awakened souls regard these aspects with compassion and understanding because they know the terrain intimately within themselves. This mutual knowing creates an atmosphere where both can be fully present. Without shrinking or inflating their identity, it is common for such a meeting to activate a strong inner stirring, as if something dormant wakes up. The soul recognizes a companion in the journey toward deeper consciousness, someone capable of perceiving life not through the narrow lens of collective conditioning but through the expansive lens of inner truth. This mutual awakening does not arise from sentiment or fantasy. It comes from the shared experience of dismantling illusions, confronting one's shadow, integrating fragmented aspects of the psyche, and discovering the inner authority that comes from self-awareness. When souls who have undergone these psychological transformations meet, they perceive each other through layers that the unawakened rarely access. It is the unconscious recognizing the unconscious, the self recognizing the self. What is most striking in such encounters is the effortless flow of understanding. Explanations become unnecessary. Context becomes irrelevant. Both souls can sense the other's intentions, emotional states, and deeper motivations without them being spoken. This intuitive perception is not magical. It is the natural consequence of having learned to read one's own inner world with clarity. Those who understand themselves deeply also understand others with similar depth. When two such individuals meet, this inner clarity amplifies, making the interaction feel almost pre-written in the psyche, as though it originates from a realm that exists beyond linear time. There is also an undeniable energetic shift that occurs. It may manifest as an internal expansion, a softening in the chest, a heightened alertness of the senses, or an unusual stillness in the body. It can feel as though two internal fires recognize the warmth in each other, merging briefly without losing their individuality. This energetic recognition is accompanied by a psychological openness that feels safe, not in a fragile or dependent way, but in a grounded and autonomous manner. Both souls know how to stand firmly within themselves, and because of this, they can meet each other without fear of losing their boundaries or identity. In many cases, this recognition brings forth insights or reflections that neither expected. Conversations, even brief ones, tend to carry symbolic weight. Words are exchanged not just as statements but as mirrors that reveal deeper layers in both individuals. Each sentence may feel like it holds multiple meanings, touching intellectual, emotional, and intuitive levels simultaneously. This multidimensional exchange is not effortful. It comes naturally because awakened souls communicate from the depths rather than from surface patterns. They speak in the language of symbols, metaphors, and truths shaped by direct psychological experience. This meeting becomes an invitation for both souls to reveal more of their essence, as if the presence of the other unlocks dormant capacities for openness. They may find themselves sharing thoughts or feelings they normally keep hidden, not because they are trying to be vulnerable, but because the environment created between them allows for effortless transparency. Authenticity becomes the default mode, and in this authenticity a kind of psychological resonance builds, forming a field where insights arise spontaneously. Even the body participates in the recognition. The nervous system relaxes, breathing deepens, and internal resistance diminishes. This physical shift reflects the unconscious message received. This person stands in truth, and therefore no defense is required. The encounter restores a sense of being seen not just externally but internally, at the level where the deepest truths reside. And this internal recognition carries a transformative quality, often leaving both individuals subtly altered, more aware, more centered, more in tune with the quiet voice within. The meeting of two awakened souls becomes a mirror through which each sees themselves more clearly, and in that clarity, something ancient within them nods in recognition, as though acknowledging that such encounters are rare but profoundly meaningful, shaped not by chance but by the deeper movement of the psyche that guides souls toward one another. When they are ready to perceive beyond the visible world, when two awakened souls stand in the presence of each other, something subtle yet profound begins to happen, as if the unseen layers of the psyche begin to unfold without being asked, without hesitation, without the instinctive retreat that so often shapes ordinary human encounters. In their meeting, the familiar masks that people unconsciously wear fall away, not through force or effort, but because such masks cannot survive in the atmosphere of truth that an awakened being naturally carries. There is no space for pretense when one has already journeyed inward, confronted their own illusions, and stripped away the layers of identity that once served as protection. Thus, when two beings who have walked this path meet, they instantly recognize that the other is not someone who needs to be impressed, controlled, or deceived. The very energy between them creates a field where authenticity becomes the only language that makes sense. In this field of authenticity, light and shadow become equally visible. The light representing the strengths, the wisdom, the clarity gained through self-awareness stands unobstructed, but equally visible are the remnants of pain, the subtle, unresolved fears, the vulnerabilities that still whisper from the unconscious. Yet, rather than being sources of shame or guardedness, these shadows become part of the shared understanding. For an awakened soul does not fear their shadow. They have already ventured into its depths, learned its symbolic language, and integrated much of what once felt overwhelming. They know that shadow is not an enemy but a teacher, not a threat but a doorway into deeper consciousness. And because they know this within themselves, they see the shadow in the other with compassion rather than judgment. There is an unspoken agreement between awakened souls that nothing needs to be hidden, not because they have nothing to hide, but because each recognizes that hiding serves no purpose in true inner growth. The moment masks dissolve, a sense of psychological clarity emerges. Each sees the other as a complete being, light and shadow, strength and fragility, consciousness and unconsciousness intertwined. There is no attempt to appear perfect, no desire to broadcast enlightenment, no performance of wisdom. Instead, both stand simply as they are, unshielded, whole, and deeply present. This mutual presence creates a rare experience of being seen as a full human being rather than as a role or projection. The dissolution of masks is often accompanied by a quiet recognition of shared wounds. Awakened souls may not know each other's stories, but they intuitively sense the emotional landscapes the other has crossed. They can feel the echoes of past battles, the loneliness required to turn inward, the disorientation of facing the unconscious, the courage it took to rebuild one's inner world from the fragments left behind by life's storms. They recognize these traces because they have lived them themselves. This recognition creates an immediate sense of psychological safety, not the fragile safety that comes from external validation, but the deep safety that arises when two beings understand each other at the level of the soul. As the masks fall away, communication shifts in quality. Words become more honest, conversations become more transparent, pauses become meaningful, spaces where reflection occurs naturally. There is no defensiveness, no need to correct perception, no need to control the narrative. Each soul listens with genuine presence, hearing not only the words spoken but the intentions beneath them, sensing the emotional currents that shape them. This level of listening is rare because it requires the quieting of the ego, the dissolution of personal agendas, and the willingness to hold space for another without trying to change or fix them. Awakened souls can offer this kind of listening because they have practiced it within themselves, listening deeply to their own inner truth. When two awakened souls meet, their shadows, instead of clashing, often align in a way that becomes illuminating. One may see in the other a pattern they have yet to fully integrate within themselves. Their encounter becomes a mirror reflecting both the progress they have made and the areas still needing attention. But unlike ordinary encounters where such reflections can provoke defensiveness or discomfort, the awakened soul receives these reflections with curiosity. They recognize that discomfort is often a signpost indicating where further inner integration is required. Thus, even gentle confrontation becomes a form of growth rather than conflict. The absence of masks allows for emotional resonance to flow freely. Emotions that are often suppressed or edited in daily interactions are allowed to surface in their true form. But because both have cultivated emotional maturity through inner work, these emotions do not overwhelm the space between them. Instead, they create a depth of interaction rarely experienced in conventional relationships. Even silence between awakened souls feels rich, layered, and meaningful. It is a silence that speaks of mutual understanding, of shared humanity, of an unspoken acknowledgement that both have walked through darkness. Emerged with greater clarity in this environment of openness, the psyche feels free to reveal aspects of itself that normally remain hidden. Thoughts arise with unusual clarity. Insights appear effortlessly. The unconscious, sensing that it is in the presence of one who will not distort its messages, allows its symbolic content to flow more easily. This is why awakened souls often find that their conversations feel transformative, not because they are trying to teach or guide each other, but because the very nature of their presence evokes deeper layers of awareness. They become catalysts for each other, igniting revelations and realizations simply by being real. This mutual revealing dissolves illusions, not only about oneself but also about relationships. The awakened soul knows that connection cannot exist where masks are present, that intimacy cannot survive where truth is avoided, that unity cannot grow where fear governs perception. Therefore, when two awakened souls meet, they instinctively create a space where truth is allowed to breathe. In such a space, emotional barriers dissolve, psychological walls fall. The heart opens without hesitation because it senses that it is not standing before an illusion but before a genuine reflection of consciousness. As masks fall away, so too does the fear of being misunderstood. Awakened souls understand that misunderstandings often arise when people interact from their personas rather than their truth. But in the presence of another who has abandoned the persona, there is no distortion. Each sees the other clearly, not through projections or fantasies, but through the grounded awareness that comes from having integrated their own inner world. This clarity fosters a profound sense of equality. Neither stands above nor below the other. Neither seeks dominance nor submission. Instead, both stand on the same inner ground, the ground of awareness, authenticity, and psychological freedom. The dissolution of masks in such an encounter is not a temporary phenomenon. It often leaves a lasting impact, reminding both individuals of what genuine connection feels like. It becomes a reference point for future relationships, a reminder that true connection is not built on performance but on presence. And even if the meeting is brief, the sense of being seen without distortion lingers in the psyche, continuing to influence one's inner journey and outer interactions, guiding them toward deeper authenticity in every aspect of life. When two awakened souls communicate, the exchange moves far beyond the realm of ordinary conversation, entering a space where meaning flows not only through words but through silence, subtle energy, intuition, and the symbolic language of the unconscious. Their interaction is not driven by the mind's need to analyze or categorize, but by the deeper intelligence that emerges when the psyche is open, receptive, and attuned to truth. Each soul listens with an inner ear, perceiving layers beneath the spoken message, sensing the emotional and symbolic textures that accompany every expression. This type of communication does not require flawless articulation or carefully selected phrases. Even fragmented thoughts or simple statements carry depth because the awakened listener perceives the intention, the emotional resonance, and the archetypal significance behind them. The conversation between awakened souls feels different because it is anchored in presence. There is no rush to respond, no need to dominate the dialogue, no urge to interrupt or prove understanding. Instead, A mutual spaciousness develops where each word is allowed to settle into consciousness and reveal its deeper meaning. They understand that communication is not about exchanging information, but about revealing layers of the inner world. Their presence transforms conversation into a gateway for insight, reflection, and connection. They intuitively recognize that the psyche speaks in symbols, metaphors, and emotional tones, and thus they naturally engage with these dimensions beneath the surface of language awakened. Souls often find themselves expressing thoughts they did not plan to share, as though the presence of the other creates a field where the unconscious feels safe enough to emerge. The inner world, normally guarded or filtered, opens effortlessly. Memories surface, insights appear, feelings reveal their true shapes. There is no fear of being misunderstood because both individuals are capable of listening without projecting their own unresolved patterns onto the other. This creates a rare environment where authenticity becomes the default mode of communication. The psyche senses that it will not be distorted or dismissed, so it allows deeper truths to flow freely. The way they understand each other extends beyond language. Their intuition picks up on subtle shifts in tone, slight changes in expression, pauses filled with meaning. Even silence becomes communicative. Silence between awakened souls is not awkward or empty. It becomes a container for reflection, a space where both can feel the presence of the other without relying on words. In this silence, insights often arise with clarity, as if the psyche uses the quiet to weave together threads of meaning that words cannot capture. Their silence becomes a shared exploration rather than a void to be filled. There is also a symbolic quality to their dialogue. Each statement carries multiple layers, some conscious and some unconscious. An awakened soul hears not only what is spoken, but also what is implied, what is hinted at, what is longing to be expressed. They recognize that beneath every surface meaning lies an archetypal one. A story of struggle might be heard as a journey of transformation. A moment of vulnerability might be perceived as an encounter with the shadow. A simple insight might reveal itself as a message from the deeper self. This multi-layered perception gives their conversation an unusual richness, as though each exchange opens a door to further exploration. Their communication is rooted in reciprocity. Each soul gives and receives equally, not in terms of quantity, but in authenticity. There is no competition for emotional or intellectual space. Both are aware of the subtle power dynamics that often shape human interactions, and both consciously dissolve those dynamics by standing in the neutrality of self-awareness. This allows both voices to emerge naturally without dominance or submission. Their dialogue becomes a dance rather than a debate, a mutual unveiling rather than an exchange of opinion. Through this balanced communication, each soul feels valued, heard, and deeply understood. Awakened souls often communicate as if they share a common inner language. They intuitively understand references to inner journeys, symbolic dreams, emotional transformations, and intuitive experiences without the need for lengthy explanation. Their words land with precision because they are received through the lens of lived experience. The other soul knows what it means to confront inner darkness, to experience moments of expansion, to struggle with conflicting aspects of the psyche, to feel the pull of the unconscious. This shared understanding creates a shorthand that makes communication feel effortless and profound. They also recognize the difference between ego expression and soul expression. When one speaks from the ego seeking validation, control, or certainty, the other senses it immediately, not to judge, but to gently guide the conversation back to authenticity. Likewise, when one speaks from the deeper self, with clarity or vulnerability, the other perceives it with resonance. This perceptiveness keeps their dialogue aligned with truth rather than illusion. Their awareness prevents the conversation from devolving into defensiveness or misunderstanding. Instead, it continuously steers both individuals towards self-discovery and mutual understanding. One of the most profound aspects of their communication is the mirroring effect that naturally arises. Each becomes a mirror reflecting the other's inner landscape. Through the way one responds, reacts, or resonates, the other gains insight into aspects of themselves they may not have fully realized. These reflections are not confrontational but illuminating. They reveal unconscious patterns, unhealed emotions, or hidden strengths. This mirroring deepens the connection and accelerates each soul's growth. The awakened soul welcomes such reflections because they have learned to see feedback as an opportunity for integration, rather than as a threat to identity. Another subtle dynamic emerges in the way awakened souls hold space for one another. They do not rush to offer solutions or advice, understanding that true transformation comes from within. Instead, They listen with a depth that allows the other to access their own clarity. Their presence becomes a catalyst that helps the psyche unfold its own wisdom. This kind of listening is rare because it requires the ego to step aside completely. It requires one to resist the urge to fix or guide, and instead to trust in the other's inner authority. This trust becomes a powerful affirmation of the other's capacity to navigate their own inner world, even when. Speaking of ordinary experiences, the communication between awakened souls carries an undercurrent of meaning. A simple observation can lead to profound reflection. A casual remark can open a doorway into deeper awareness. This is not because they are trying to intellectualize everything, but because their consciousness naturally connects the outer world with the inner one. They see the symbolic in the mundane, the psychological in the everyday, the spiritual in the human. Thus, every conversation becomes an opportunity to explore the psyche more deeply. Communication between awakened souls also creates a sense of expansion. Thoughts feel clearer. Emotions feel more understood. Insights feel more accessible. The psyche becomes more fluid, more expressive, more courageous. This expansion is not the result of persuasion or influence, but of resonance. The presence of the other awakens dormant parts of the self, inviting them to participate in the dialogue. This creates a feeling of inner alignment, as if all aspects of the self are being acknowledged, integrated. Through the interaction, through this kind of communication, awakened souls experience connection not as an emotional dependency, but as a mutual recognition of inner truth. They do not seek to complete or define each other. They do not cling to agreement or reject disagreement. Instead, they communicate from a place of curiosity, openness, and psychological freedom. Their dialogue becomes a meeting of two inner worlds, each vast, complex, and evolving, and through this meeting, both souls continue to awaken more deeply within themselves. When two awakened souls meet, their encounter becomes an alchemical event, where both individuals feel their inner worlds expanding, shifting, and clarifying simply through the presence of the other. This is not a dramatic transformation in the external sense, but a subtle, profound stirring within the psyche, as though two inner fires suddenly burn with greater intensity. Neither soul tries to change the other, yet change happens naturally. Neither attempts to lead or follow, yet both move in harmony. It is as if the energy between them forms a space where growth unfolds organically, without force, without resistance, without expectation. This transformative quality arises because both individuals have already cultivated the discipline of self-observation, shadow integration, and psychological honesty. Thus, their meeting amplifies what already exists within them, bringing forth insights, clarity, and new layers of understanding in this alchemical space. Qualities that were once dormant begin to awaken. One might feel a surge of creativity, a deeper connection to intuition, or a sudden awareness of emotional patterns previously overlooked. The presence of the other acts as a catalyst, not because they intentionally provoke change, but because their authenticity, depth, and clarity reflect hidden aspects of the self. This reflection is not harsh or invasive. It is gentle yet unmistakably illuminating. The psyche responds to this illumination by revealing more of itself, offering new symbols, memories, and realizations that rise from the unconscious with surprising ease. The encounter becomes a mirror in which both individuals see not only who they are, but who they are becoming. As both souls resonate with each other, the boundaries between the conscious and unconscious begin to soften. Insights that would normally require deep contemplation or introspection appear effortlessly. Emotions that were once complex or confusing become understandable. Conflicting inner voices begin to harmonize. The inner landscape feels more navigable because the presence of the other brings clarity to the symbolic patterns that shape perception. It is as if each soul helps the other decode their own psyche, not through deliberate analysis, but through the natural resonance of shared awareness. This mutual amplification creates a sense of psychological acceleration where growth that might have taken months or years unfolds within moments. This alchemical impact also extends to the emotional realm. Emotions that were stagnant begin to move. Feelings that were buried begin to rise. Wounds that had hardened begin to soften. The awakened soul does not fear these emotional shifts because they have already faced themselves deeply, and in meeting someone who carries the same level of awareness, they feel safe to let the emotional body express itself freely. There is no need to hide insecurity, no pressure to appear strong, no fear of being misinterpreted. In this openness, emotions transform rather than repeat themselves. They evolve because they are seen, honored, and held in a space free of judgment and egoic reaction. This transformative meeting is not always gentle. Sometimes the presence of another awakened soul reveals aspects of the self that one has not fully integrated. Old fears, unresolved patterns, or subtle shadows may rise to the surface, but instead of triggering defensiveness or withdrawal, these revelations often evoke curiosity and courage. Each soul recognizes that what is emerging is an opportunity for further integration. The other's presence makes it easier to face these inner fragments because both understand that growth requires confronting what lies beneath the surface. The discomfort becomes meaningful, not threatening, and both individuals feel strengthened by the willingness to see themselves more clearly. At times, the encounter may evoke a sense of déjà vu, as if the souls had met in another time, another form, or another dimension of awareness. This sense is not necessarily literal but symbolic, arising from the deep familiarity created when two individuals share similar inner paths. The psyche interprets this resonance as recognition, and recognition often feels ancient. This ancientness contributes to the transformative atmosphere, making the meeting feel predestined, purposeful, and deeply aligned with each soul's inner trajectory. It becomes clear that the encounter is not random but part of a larger movement of consciousness, guiding both individuals toward deeper self-realization. Their shared presence also awakens a sense of unity, not in the superficial sense of merging identity, but in the deeper sense of recognizing the interconnectedness of consciousness. Each soul becomes aware of how their inner process mirrors the others, how their challenges resonate with each other, how their insights complement one another. This unity does not dissolve individuality but strengthens it. The awakened soul understands that true unity comes from authenticity, and authenticity flourishes when the self is fully expressed. Thus, they meet not to lose themselves in each other, but to see themselves more clearly through each other in this alchemical encounter.